know like how much force it takes to beat somebody with your bare hands, how much violence that takes, how much anger that takes, how much hate that has to take. This system is not working. And matter of fact, let me take it back. It is working. It's working exactly the way that it's intended to. I think we need to break the system, shut it the down, and reimagine what it's like for our communities to actually be safe. Police pulling us over in unmarked cars, wearing street clothing, that's not them trying to keep us safe. That's them targeting us. That is them specifically seeking us out. That is them specifically trying to criminalize us. The issue is criminalization and incarceration. And until we can get legislators in office that's going to do more than do photo ops and kneel on kente cloths like they did something, then we're going to keep being in the streets and people are going to keep dying and black people are going to continue to be hashtag.
All right, welcome back to the show. As I told you, there are a lot of thoughts, a lot of commentary about where we go from here. And I can't have this conversation by myself. We've got to bring in some folks who really know what they're talking about. Let's talk, let's bring in to Brother from Another, both making their Brother from Another debut, both of them. And I hope it's the first, that not just the first, but you know what I'm saying, not the last time. You know what I'm trying to say. I want you to come back many, many, many times. We have Olayemi Olurin. She's a movement lawyer. I love that. A movement lawyer and a political commentator. And we have Sam Sinyangwe, who is a data scientist and co-founder or founder of Mapping Police Violence. So welcome to the show. And you heard that, and this is a great place to start, Sam and Ole, that I said right before you came on, you could get, 25 people together, 25 conscious, righteous people, and you're going to have a number of opinions about where do we go from here after seeing yet another death at the hands of the state. In this case, a 29-year-old man who had his life taken away by multiple, I'm not going to say 5, because it maybe was more than that, by multiple police officers in Memphis. So Ole, first question, I'll make it open-ended. Where do we go from here?
Honestly, I want to say that everything that we're going to say has been said before. That's the unfortunate reality of this, right? They killed 1,192 people last year. This is a constant thing. These are not new problems. These are not new pains. And it's important for America to recognize that justice is not what you do after someone has been killed by the police. It's what you do to prevent it. And they always create this conversation about reform, and they make it seem as though advocates, the Black community, is against reform. But it's not us who's against reform. It's not us who's saying that the system can't be reformed. It's them. We're the ones saying, hey, police are killing us. These things need to change. And they're the ones who are telling us it's okay. We constantly have this fight where we watch murders happen on video, and then we have to convince this country, we have to beg and plead for a few officers to be charged with murders we saw them commit. And they defend it and they fight it. And the police unions come out and tell us it's okay. The legislators come out and tell us it's okay. They come out and defend it. So it's not us saying that the system is working as intended. It's them. And we don't have a problem with reform efforts that actually prevent people from being killed, that take power away from the state, but they don't want to do that. They offer us, placating initiatives like body cameras and body camera footage, and these kinds of initiatives are completely the antithesis of what America is or who America is. Because let's be honest, this idea that, America will change or America will be moved to be sympathetic if they see Black people being killed on video. How many Black people do we need to be killed on video before we understand that America is not sympathetic to that? This is a country whose history used to have lynchings and make it a sport. They watch lynchings as a family. They did postcards. So we're not being honest with ourselves about who the country is. If we keep saying that sympathy out of the goodness of their hearts, it's going to change. So where do we go from here? I mean, America has to tell us, because we've said what needs to happen. We say our community should not be lined with police officers. We talk about what needs to happen. They'll talk about George Floyd, and they'll be so moved and so sympathetic about what happens to George Floyd, but they never talk about why the police were in that neighborhood, why they were called in the first place. They don't actually talk about, hey, maybe we should not have armed police officers conducting traffic stops. They never actually talk about the initiatives that prevent it. Instead, they talk about giving police more funding. They talk about giving police more training. And I say this, police have more. In the U.S., we give more money to policing than anything else. There's nothing we give and put more money into than we do mass incarceration and policing and training. So what is the magical number that is going to prevent these deaths and everything from occurring? Why is it always keep giving more resources to the same people that are brutalizing a community rather than those communities themselves? I've never in my life heard someone say, hey, someone is there to serve somebody that has less, right? Well, that makes no sense. Why do the people that are charged to allegedly protect you have more than you have? And we also have to talk about the fact that the safest communities are not the communities that are most policed. They're the ones that are most resourced. And we have to actually talk about moving power away from the state. It's not enough to say, oh, we're going to pass reform initiatives. But that reform initiatives is to keep giving more money to your killers, to keep upholding qualified immunity and all these things to prevent them from being accountable. Where do we go from here is how do we actually prevent it? It is not enough for them to say justice is the words that they use, that they're sympathetic. Oh, this is so sad that they give settlements. You cannot bring those people back. There's no justice that you can give to the family of Tyre Nichols. There's no justice that you can give to his 4-year-old son that's left without his father. There is no justice for that. So we actually have to stop it. But that's the conversation that they don't really want to have.
No, honestly, building on this point, as Ole said, there are nearly 1,200 people killed by police last year. We're able to document that is at an all-time high, at least over the past decade, which is as far back as we even have reliable data on people killed by police, because the federal government still to this day will not collect reliable and comprehensive data on people who are killed by police, let alone all of the other forms of police violence that occur much more frequently in communities. Now, what do we do about it? Where do we go from here? Well, first, when we look at the data, 2022 was not an outlier when it comes to the types of circumstances in which people were killed by the police. There were more people killed, but the circumstances remained largely the same. It's people being killed after routine traffic stops, people being killed after mental health calls, people being killed for a whole range of low-level, nonviolent issues that armed police officers are being called into, where ultimately people end up being killed. And so, in order to change that dynamic, we have to remove the police from those situations. We have to create real and at-scale alternatives, not just to mental health calls, which are already starting up in some cities. You have in Denver with the STAR program, you have in San Francisco now, the majority of mental health calls are being responded to by mental health clinicians through their program. So there are some programs that are starting in a handful of cities around that issue. But when it comes to traffic enforcement, the majority of police contacts across the country are traffic stops. About 100 people are killed every year after a routine traffic stop for a traffic violation and nothing else. So, we have to remove the police from traffic enforcement. When you go to other places, other countries, for example, they don't have the police, physical police, pulling people over with guns for driving over the speed limit or having an expired tag or having a broken taillight. That doesn't happen. In the United States, it happens and people are being killed over it. So again, there are solutions to each one of these types of situations. It involves not sending a police officer, sending in a real alternative that is somebody who is trained to deal with those situations, that's not a police officer, that is not armed. And we're already seeing those approaches already working in some cities that are beginning to scale them up. The problem is there are 18,000 different police jurisdictions. Very few of them have any real alternatives. And in the meantime, police are continuing to step up the violence, continue to respond more aggressively to these types of situations year over year, and people are losing their lives.
Yeah.
You know what, and I want you both to continue on this. This is great. And Sam, stay right there, because I want to bring up something. I saw you speak about 6 years ago. You gave a talk. You were talking about taking away some of these narratives, some of these false narratives, countering them with data, and offering. You had a 10-point solution. Sorry, 10 steps that we could take. So what's more difficult? Is it more difficult to kind of disabuse people of these narratives that they have in their heads that are not factually based? Or is it more of a challenge to get people, as Ole said, who are hoarding power and a bit of self-preservation? Hey, this system benefits me. I'm not trying to give this up. Is it more difficult to get people to take these solutions and give up their power, or is it harder to get people these antiquated notions out of their heads about what true policing is?
So, both are necessary. I think that we can't get to the solutions conversation until we disabuse people of some of these narratives. that they use in place of even acknowledging a problem exists, right? So there are these narratives that the police have been pushing for decades, even centuries, about a narrative that goes something like this, that the police are killing people, particularly Black people, because they're encountering violent people in communities with high rates of crime, and they're needing to protect themselves and others from harm. That's like the narrative the police use. Every single time they kill somebody, they put out some press release that basically follows that narrative. Then we learn when the video comes out that in fact it was a very different situation. We learn when we look at the actual data, when we unpack the data, that in fact, only about 1 in every 3 cases in which somebody's killed by police began with a case where it was a reported or alleged, not convicted, alleged violent crime. 1 in 3. For 2/3 of cases in which people are killed by police every single year, we're talking about these low-level, non-violent offenses, which the police respond to. In some cases, no crime at all. The police just find somebody, decide to harass them for no apparent reason, and ultimately people are being killed over these routine, low-level stops. So again, that's what's going on when we look at the real data. It's not the police narrative of constantly being in danger, constantly being at risk of violence from the community. That's not the life that the police are currently leading. The police are in environments where they're heavily armed, heavily protected, with militarized equipment, in communities that are not protected from the police, and are engaged in harassing and stopping and abusing people for low-level nonviolent issues that the police escalate with violence and even deadly force.
Yeah. We have to transform, honestly, what we have to do is we have to transform what people believe justice is, what people believe is happening in the criminal system, and what people believe the police do. Because first of all, nationwide, over 80% of all arrests are for misdemeanors, traffic offenses, or non-violent crime. They're not felonies. They're not these violent crimes. It's not what it's being sensationalized to mean in our media. And so people have this idea that people who find themselves in the criminal system, people who are having incidents with police officers are bad people. They're doing particularly bad things. And that's not the truth. The overwhelming majority of people that are incarcerated in America are people who made less than $12,000 annually prior to arrest. It's poor people. That's what you're actually seeing in the system, not this. And then I think more importantly, people need to stop thinking of justice as when the police come about. When police come about and they arrest people or they incarcerate people, how police respond to scenarios. Like if we take an example of the reality is LAPD, we're in the first month of 2023. LAPD killed 3 men back to back, all having mental health crises within a 24-hour span. And if you look at Takara Smith's own wife walked to LAPD. She walked into the police station and said, my husband is having a mental health crisis, and handed them a number to a mental health professional and asked them to call. What did they do? 15 minutes later, they come to her home and they shoot and kill her husband. That is not help. That is not justice. And what's important to remember that they'll justify these things after the fact by vilifying the victim. They'll say they were in danger. This person posed a threat to them. But there's no world in which we, as civilians, if his wife had killed him, if anybody else had killed him in response to his mental health crisis, they would be arrested. They would be incarcerated. They would be charged. But somehow it's okay for police, the people that are supposed to allegedly help, to come in and kill people. And that is a routine thing. 3 people back to back. And the problem is, in a country where we are literally not being hyperbolic, police kill more than one person every single day. You can't even catch up to the lives lost, right? We're talking about Tyre Nichols, and that already has drowned out Keenan Anderson, and Keenan Anderson has already drowned out Takara Smith. We can't even keep up with the deaths, and then people will translate justice. I saw somebody online today said, well, not to be insensitive, but justice has already been served about Tyre Nichols. And I'm like, justice to you is charging these officers, or that you know their identity. And not that a conviction would constitute justice, because like I said, there is no justice when he's dead. His family has to mourn him. But if you look at that and you think, oh, because you know the 5 Black officers that killed Tyre Nichols, that's justice. Meanwhile, you still don't know the identity of the 8 officers that shot Jayland Walker 60 times in Ohio.
Right.
You see?
Right. Absolutely. And I'll tell you this, Sam, I'm going to, let me brag on Ole here for a second. Unfortunately, I have to brag on this prophecy. I mean, it's not a great thing, but it is a great thing. It just tells you where her mind is. She wrote in the summer, okay, over the summer, 2022, talking about Black people who are speaking against the interests of the Black community, and really breaking it down of, hey, you're being allowed to speak, not because these people like you, but they have tokenized you. They're using you as a tool, right?
Yeah.
But here's the line. So you are a tool, and should you cease to be useful, you will be discarded. That's why White police officers kill black people every day and avoid charges, even when thousands of people march and demand them. But black police officers who do the same find themselves quickly fired and prosecuted. Ole, you wrote that over the summer. What do we have in the winter of 2023? Could you help people out, for those who still don't understand what you're trying to say, could you help people out about like the dynamics of this depending on the race of the police officer?
The reality is white supremacy does not need a white person in the room to function in a country where white supremacy is ingrained in your institutions. And that's what people need to understand about systemic racism. You could diversify the police department all you want. You can diversify the people who brutalize you and kill you. It changes nothing to do with the problem, because often, and this is a reality we know across our community, you could quote James Baldwin or you could quote NWA. We are long aware of the reality of the black policemen because they are working overtime to prove their solidarity with that badge. And the thing is this: if you as a black person, we all know you have an option to go and legitimize white supremacist talking points. You always have that option. They will always welcome you. You are always welcome. Black police officers are welcome to join the police departments. You are welcome to be agents of white supremacy. But the moment it is not to their benefit, they will not protect you the way that they protect their own. And that's what we're seeing here. People think when I highlight, how the black police officers, they're making them the face of police brutality. They're doing that on purpose. I knew before we saw the video, the moment the fact 3 days after this beating, they arrested these, fired these officers, and they charged them, and they came out and told us how brutal it is. It's the most brutal video we've ever seen. I knew why they were doing that, because they painting them as brutal, the brutality aligns with the narrative they've always had about black men as brutes, right? It's a reason why they're not talking about this as police brutality, but instead they're calling it black on black crime. It's a reason why they're painting them as thugs rather than talking about them as policemen, because it allows them to make us the face of brutality while not recognizing any overarching problems in policing. And that's not to say, oh, these officers should be being treated better. I have no sympathy for them. I wish to make an example out of them in the same way that the police departments and our legislators and white supremacists want to make an example of them, but for different reasons. It's to show you, hey, you're welcome to do this. You can do this. You can mistreat your community. You can brutalize us the same way, but you will not be protected in the end. And that's what you're witnessing. And this isn't new. That's important to remember. I have a thread on Twitter of over hundreds of deaths. Hundreds of people have been killed by police. And everywhere on that thread that I have a black police officer that killed them, they're charged every single time. And that is something that's important to remember. Yeah.
Sam and Ole, please, before we get out of here, look, the education starts step by step. How can some folks kind of get to your levels? You guys are the class leaders, okay? The straight A+ students in this conversation. So how can we get to your levels? Where do we start just to kind of educate ourselves about where we are? I'm not saying that there are any quick solutions here to fix it, but how do we start educating ourselves and getting more informed about the problems that we're facing today?
Sam.
So, there are a couple of things that we could do. One, my approach is to look at the data. Like, I'm a data-driven person. If that is your approach, like, go to mappingpoliceviolence.us, go to policescorecard.org, two websites that house a lot of data that we've collected around police use of force and police shootings, deaths by police, et cetera. So all of that is broken down to help people understand, like, why does this keep happening again and again? Who is being impacted? What are some of the approaches that different cities or even states are taking to address it, and why might those approaches not be working? I think, like, beyond that, once you get that data, look at your particular city or state, because so much of this is decentralized. There are 18,000 different police jurisdictions. It might be that in your particular city, there is an issue that even in the data is a clear and outlying issue that might not be as much of an issue in another city, but you can use the data to help identify those issues and bring those to elected leaders, policymakers, or ultimately replace those people if they're not trying to listen, but ultimately get some far-reaching transformative changes adopted that remove the police from as many of these functions as possible, that take the funding from those functions, invest them in real alternatives, and start researching those alternatives as well. I mentioned Denver, the STAR program. San Francisco has a mental health first response program that's really at scale now. We're getting to scale. Take a look at some of those programs online and what they're doing and see if you can get one of those in your cities.
I think political education. You know, I think people think as an attorney, you think you're doing God's work, but I think the honest truth is education and learning more and about the reality and unlearning a lot of what we've been taught and indoctrinated to believe about our society is what really makes the change. Like, my college professor handed me Our Prisons Are Obsolete. And even to someone who knew the criminal system was racist, that was the first time I heard that. I'm like, abolish the criminal systems, because you're raised to think of these man-made systems, prisons, mass incarceration, policing. That's all you've ever known. So you think of it like water and air rather than things that don't have to be there, things that are policy choices. And that was the beginning of a long journey for me. So I think the first thing you have to recognize, the first thing you need to do is start educating yourself, recognize the police as interest groups, and the biases and the way that you're fed propaganda. I think the second thing is to realize that nobody gives up their entire foundation the first time it's challenged. That's just not true. People tend to approach this work in educating themselves and others like, what's the one thing, I get this question a lot, what's the one thing you could tell somebody to, shut them up? Nothing. There is nothing. It's a process. There's a process. I couldn't tell you today I became an abolitionist, or when was the moment. There was no one particular thing. It's an accumulation of information. So I would say I started with Our Prisons Obsolete by Angela Davis. I would look at, Becoming Abolitionist by Derek Purnell. I would look at End of Policing by Alex Vitale. I would look at, We Do It Till We Free Us by Mariam Kaba. I would follow people like me, follow people like Sam, and really start to learn. But give yourself the grace and start scrutinizing what you're being fed. Ask yourself, all the incidents you see of police lies, look at Uvalde and tell yourself, should we be treating police narratives as the facts? Is that objective reporting? Is there something we should push back on? And that's why I say political education, because change, that's how we shift social consciousness. At the end of the day, there's a reason why in the wake of, these things are connected, in the wake of 2020, people will talk about how they have more legislation, to increase police funding. But what they don't talk about in connection to that is how much efforts you see to prevent certain books, history. It's not a coincidence that on the rise of the largest social justice movement they've seen in the country, they've now done their endeavor best to keep all these materials, all these people out of your spaces, because they recognize that people support this. Americans are complicit with this because that's what they've been indoctrinated to believe in. And the average person in this country lives check to check. They do not have the time to be me or Sam and be engaged this on a day-to-day basis. So they trust their legislators and their journalists to tell them things. So when they actually start getting educated and unlearn these things, they stop supporting it. So that's why you see Republicans in so much effort to keep people from ever hearing the information at all. So I cannot emphasize enough, to me, education is really how we move forward. Because I could have easily been, I tell people, it's real nice when I'm an advocate for the right thing, but I could be just this dogmatic for the wrong thing had I not been educated and, opened up to certain, you can imagine this level of intensity on the other side, it would be a problem. So I say education. Yeah.
Hey, thank you for watching Brother from Another. If you haven't hit that subscribe button, go ahead and do that now. Don't forget, you can catch us 3 to 4 weekdays on PeacockTV.com and on Sirius XM Channel 85.